Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dundee Church Podcast here at Dundee Church in Omaha. Lovely Omaha.
Lovely
Omaha, Nebraska on a very cool October day.
Oh, it's beautiful.
My name is J.D. Georlett. I'm the senior pastor here at Dundee Church, and I'm joined once again by my good friend, colleague, compatriot, or whatever you want to compombre, Keith Holmes.
I am. It is I.
And we are working our way through the book of John, chapter 6. We are on chapter 6. We encourage you. I can't even remember what episode. What is this, about the 10th episode? So if you're just merging in with us here, you've got other episodes that you can check out. And each one of them is standing alone on their own. I mean, like any gospel story, one builds upon the other, but they also stand on their own. So we're happy to have you with us. Today, we're going to be working through the first 21 verses of the book of John, chapter 6. And that's the feeding of the 5,000.
Right.
And it's Jesus walking on water.
Right.
Spoiler alert, he succeeds at both. So in case you were wondering, if you're showing up to find out whether or not he can actually pull it off, I should probably not have told them that. Darn.
Some of them I think may already know.
Yeah.
Some may already.
They may know that he did feed 5,000, and it was not with a stadium full of food.
No, it was not trucks of food or carts of
And by walking on water, I mean water that was deep enough not to be walked on.
Right.
Then we open today with the thought provoking. We always try to open you with something for you to think about, and even maybe stop the podcast and spend some time just kind of really meditating on. And it is, what is your most memorable day with Jesus?
Yeah.
And I gave Keith a lot of time to think about this.
Yes, all of 5 to 10 minutes.
Right.
It's pretty amazing.
And so I'm going to go first.
Yeah, go first.
I mean, I have several.
Inspire me.
Well, I mean, I have several memorable days. I mean, when I became a Christian when I was 21 years old, it was very much the product of having had a dream one night, and I'll spare you the details about it because it's a long story. But the dream was so clear. It's still to this day. That was 35 years ago, and it's almost like I had that dream last night. I can see it in my mind, and it inspired me to go and talk to a Christian friend of mine about Jesus Christ, and we talked through the night about questions of faith and what it is to be a Christian, and he's still one of my best friends, and I just said upon leaving his house after having that conversation, I just said, okay, Jesus, if you want me, here I am, I'm yours. Not really even knowing what I was saying there, just knowing that I wanted to be counted with him.
That's pretty cool, dude.
Yeah.
To openly and just boldly say, if you want me, here I am.
Yeah.
And look what he did. He made you the lead pastor that you are today. Yeah. And, well, I mean, seriously, though,
that was unthinkable.
We get a lot of stuff thrown at us as pastors.
Right.
And so, it's one of those deals. It's like, well, okay. I always think back to Paul, it's like when I can't think of his name right now, the guy that helps him after the road to Damascus, and he says, I am going to show him what he must suffer, and take my gospel to the Gentiles.
Right.
And I just think that needs to be the plaque on every pastor's wall. I will show him what he will suffer.
Right.
Because to open your heart and your life to say, here I am, take me if you want me.
Yeah.
And he does.
But I didn't know
Right.
the suffering there.
No.
And it's a good thing I didn't. But at the same time, I get your point, I think, is that even knowing the suffering, you would have said yes.
I think
to
you
that.
would have said yes, even if you had.
Yeah, I hope I would. I don't want to give myself too much credit. The other
Well,
story that really
you can't give yourself any credit. It's all God.
Yeah,
at that
exactly.
point.
Well, that's true. The other story that I would share with you is when our son, our firstborn, was born on the day he was born in 95. We had in mind 3 names. One of the names was Pierce, And so I left Laura, my wife, in the delivery room because it was going to be hours before she was going to deliver. I said, I'm going to go to the chapel and I'm going to pray. And I went, and as I walked along, I was praying about the name, what to name the child. I said, God, I want you to name the child. And I turned the last corner to the chapel, and above the door it said Pierce Memorial Chapel. So I was like, I went in, I said, okay, and I got down on my knees. I said, all right. And I told Laura the story, and she was like, oh, all right, that's it, I guess. Anyway, so I mean, but as I say, though, those are very visceral, very active memories in my mind. But there's so many other days.
Oh, yeah.
Where they should have been memorable.
Right.
But I haven't made them memorable.
I was lamenting that before we started, and we were talking about this question just before we started, because it makes me sad and angry at myself for not knowing. It should, like I said, it should be cream floating right on the top. Those days with Jesus should be, those memories should be floating on the top. And yet I struggle. I think, for me, I remember the most memorable day for me, I was kind of with or without Jesus, is my wedding day. Alice being all beautiful. But we had gone through premarital counseling, and we had been talking with our pastor about what our marriage would be. And it is a marriage of three. And Christ is the head of the household. That's and so my most memorable day with Jesus is the day that we wed. That Alice and he and I all came together as a unit, and we bowed down to him.
All three
of us
came together that day.
Exactly. And we bowed down to him and say, what would you have us do? And yeah, there have been bumps. No marriage is perfect and 100%,
right.
Easy ride, easy flowing. But because I think those are the days I forget that Jesus is the head when I want my way. And those are the days that Alice forgets when, that Jesus is the head, and we should be submitting to his will.
Right.
Because we want our own way
right.
in certain things. So, yeah, I look back at it and I just go, yeah, I think that's probably it. It's just the day and knowing that Christ is in my marriage, it makes my marriage
right.
so much better.
And it's a good answer. In one of the things that I'd build on that is that you stop bowing down to him, but then the minute you start bowing down to him again, it resets.
Right.
You get away from that. Not just in that, we all do in different situations where we start sitting on the throne.
Yes.
So
wait a minute, I'm the man. It says the man is the head of the house.
Right. Yeah. There's a cartoon of God sitting on the throne, and he's talking to a dog and a cat, and the dog is like, "Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be here." And the cat says, "You're sitting in my chair." And so you can get like the cat sometimes, but then the minute you're like, "Oh, God, I'm sitting in your chair."
Right.
And no wonder my life or my relationship with this person or that person or my attitude is off. I'm sitting in the wrong place. Yep. But the great thing is the minute you stop and reset yourself into that being a servant. And I loved what you said about your marriage, your relationship, how it started and but you continue, both of you, I know Alice too, you come back to that place where you're bowing down to God.
Right.
And it gets right back into rhythm.
Isn't
right?
It true? It's so true.
That's the brilliance of God, because that's not always the case with everybody, other people that we're in relationship with, where you seek renewal, you seek reset, right. And it never does reset.
Right.
And God's ability to say, "Yep, I'm going to sit back down on the throne. We're going to get right back into rhythm," and it happens. This is how we start today. First 21 verses of the book of John, chapter 6. Like we said, we're talking about the feeding of the 5,000 and the story of Jesus walking on water. We encourage you to read those 21 verses just because of time, right. And because we are under the assumption that we have very profound things to say. We want you to read those verses. So stop us here and read, and then come back. And as you read, think in terms of what does Jesus do with the 5,000. What doesn't he do with the 5,000? Right. And if I asked you that, what would be some things that came to mind?
Obviously, some of the let's clear out the easy ones, right?
Yeah, right. That's why we ask the questions.
He feeds 5,000 people.
Yeah,
with
that's one of the things.
2 fish and 5 loaves.
Right.
He just simply says, take this food and start handing it out.
Right.
And the miracle of that
right.
is written down for us here in John. I think what he doesn't do is he doesn't send them away. He doesn't make them rely on themselves. He doesn't really just say, go help yourselves. I'll help you out if you help yourselves. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I think he really sets himself up here to say, I can do this. Mm-hmm. Can you?
Yeah.
I mean, in this, in this accounting, he asks Philip, well, what do you think we should do?
Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute,
right? And so he's testing, he's doing all this, and I think what he's doing is he's showing his godhood, he's showing his divinity.
Yes.
In the fact that he is the only one that can do this.
Right. One of the things along those lines is that one of the things that he does not do is he does not allow the presence of the 5,000 and the problem that they bring. Mm-hmm. And there's more than just one problem. I should use the plural there. Yeah. 5,000 people or more. And the other Gospels make it clear that was the number of men.
Right.
So it's an enormous crowd that are following him. He does not allow their problems, their needs, their demands to cause him to be anxious at all.
Right.
And I want to pause on that because being a person of a certain anxiety, as I am, and everybody is a person of a certain anxiety.
Right.
Every single person has a certain anxiety. In some cases, it is life-threatening, and it's completely inhibiting to some people. Other people just manage it and get by and all that kind of stuff. But we are all of a certain anxiety. What stands out, what he does not do, is he does not allow their demands, their pushing it to ever. He is such a cool cucumber. Right. Building on what you said, and he's cool because. He's cool in that situation because he knows who he is.
Right.
He's divine. He is sovereign. He has complete control of any situation. And the question then for me is, do we have that? Are we willing to allow his sovereignty, his coolness, his lack of anxiety to be a salve, to be a comfort for us in our anxiety? Yeah. 5,000 people are coming to him to be healed, to be taught, to be ultimately to be fed in the middle of nowhere. That is an anxiety producing. I mean, I'd be like, how are we going to solve this? How are we going to organize all this kind of stuff? Tons of different things that would keep me up. Yeah. And he's just like, there is no sense of that at all.
You say, essentially, you say, how are we going to solve this? How are we going to do that? The we that you speak of is different than the we that Jesus speaks of, because Jesus would say, how are we going to do this, Dad? Yeah. And God says, there's going to be some fish and loaves coming your way. Don't worry about that, I mean, but the we in there has to include God. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I think you're right. The anxiety, one of the interesting things is what was our most memorable day? And without Jesus, I remember I had walked away from my walk with Christ and whatnot. And I still remember the day that I let a kid get off a bus at the wrong stop. Mm. And the father was waiting at the next stop. And it was like, I didn't know what to do because I was depending wholly on myself in that moment, and I didn't have Christ with me, or I wasn't listening to him. I'm sure he was there going, Keith, hang on, pray to me and I'll help you out. And so I think, the we that Jesus had is amazing, is that he has that relationship with the Father, and he knows, and as a human, because he was 100% human, that had to relieve the anxiety that the human side of Christ was having.
That he could potentially have had.
Right.
That he certainly had in other situations, particularly the Garden of Gethsemane, where he was facing the bleeding, sweating blood, and he was in such anxiety and such distress. So it's not that he didn't. I mean, it's a good point that you make. It's not that he did not have the ability to have that, or he was completely free of anxiety.
Right.
He did, but he was able to process that. And in the fact that he was divine, my question for myself is, JD, are you going to let his divinity and sovereignty bring you healing? And are you going to let your trust in that sovereignty, in that divinity, in that power bring you healing? Amen. Or are you only going to allow your anxieties to be relieved when he delivers? Because he hasn't delivered yet. He has not, but he's cool even before he's just completely at peace in the whole thing. It really stands out to me. And the other thing that he doesn't do, that he does do and doesn't do, he welcomes the people. He doesn't send them away. There was never a moment in Jesus' mind where he's like, well, here's a situation that I can't handle, or here's a situation that I don't want to handle, that I don't want to welcome. I mean, these are what does this say to you about your own life? I mean, I doubt that there's ever going to be a situation in your life that is going to be more extreme than feeding 5,000 people with literally, no supply at all. I mean, that is a completely impossible situation. Yep. And Jesus is like, okay, whatever, let's what
do we have?
Let's go. Let's welcome this impossibility. Yep. And are you going to find peace in my simple, in just trusting that I can handle it, not understanding, not knowing what I'm going to do next, not knowing what's going to come next, but just knowing that I'm here. Right. And so that's a lesson for all of us who are, facing whatever kind of situation.
For me, that kind of leads us into my answer to the second question that you had today.
Please,
I'm going to segue nicely.
Share it with us if you must.
What is the test and how did the disciples do is your next question. And I think for me, the test was a simple question. Do you believe, or did they believe that he could do it? Mm-hmm. Because he asks, he says, well, what would you do?
Right.
Well, 200 denarii would not feed this, and that's like a year's worth of work, by the way. That's the wages of, so just imagine your annual salary not being able to feed the people that are there with Christ, and thinking, okay, how are we going to do this?
Right.
Because I can't even feed them. Even if I spent every penny I made in a year, I couldn't feed these people. What are we going to do? So I think, the question then, the test really was, do you believe I can do this?
Right.
And the answer for some of them was, no, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know what you're going to do.
This is a story that all four Gospels report. It's a miracle that all four, other than the resurrection, it's the one miracle that appears in all four Gospels. And in John's version, he sits down. He is very proactive. He goes to Philip. It's not. Yeah. I mean, it's a test of all the disciples, but particularly it's Philip. Philip was from the area where this happened. He was a nearby. He's, I believe, from Bethsaida, right down the road. He knew exactly where they were. And Jesus turns to Philip and says, "Where are we going? Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" There's a certain anxiety in that question that Jesus is met, and then John has very quickly said, he said this to test Philip, to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. So we see a certain slyness, if for lack of, in Jesus. I know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to test you.
Let's see what the local boy has
to
say
and see what kind of answer are you going to. And predictably, Philip was like 6 months' wages couldn't pay. A year's worth of wages couldn't pay enough for everybody to get a bite. How does he handle the test? Could we say that Philip fails the test, or is that too harsh? Well, I think it's too harsh.
Well, and I'm, oddly enough, I'm like, no, I think he failed it. You and I are usually the opposite side of this coin. It's like, oh no, JD, don't be so harsh on him. But no, I mean, he's like, well, I can't think of a way. I mean, and he's standing in front of what he considers to be the Messiah, the chosen one of God. He himself is following this guy like, this is the guy that I've given up everything for, and he still can't think of him in the right way. So I think he failed. I think he couldn't do it.
He doesn't. He fails in the standpoint that he doesn't give the answer of, he should have given the Ezekiel answer at the Valley of Dry Bones, where God says, can these dry bones live? And Ezekiel says, only you know, only you can know. Right. And that would be the answer. But Philip answers completely in very tangible, very economical terms. There's no possible way that we could buy enough for everybody to get a bite. Mathematical terms, logistical terms. How are we going to even get the food here? For all these thousands of people. He does fail from the standpoint that he doesn't look beyond and towards God's possibilities. Philip only looks as far as what is humanly possible, what's humanly understandable. Yeah, there's a failure in that, yet it's an understandable failure, and it's a lesson to all of us. Jesus did this to test him, meaning, and I think you're right, that perhaps Philip was capable of the Ezekiel answer. Yeah. The question is whether or not, how this applies to our lives, whether or not we are capable of the Ezekiel answer. And the Ezekiel answer is from Ezekiel 37, where the valley of the dry bones, and only you know whether or not this impossible thing can happen.
Because that's what God asks Ezekiel. He says, "Can these dry bones live?" Again.
Right.
And Ezekiel, I think, in the most unpresumptuous way, realizes that I'm standing in the presence of God. He can do anything. Right. Only He knows. And that's right. By the way, I do want to apologize. I said a year's worth, and you're right. The Bible does say 6 months' wages, so apologize to everyone there.
We'll think about forgiving you.
Okay, good deal. But yeah, so here he is. Again, like I said, I think he should have known the answer. Now, judge not lest you be judged. I'm not judging him and saying he was a bad disciple, because I forget constantly how amazing Jesus is.
And that is the lesson for us as we discuss this.
Right.
Who cares? I mean, forgive me for saying it this way, but who cares what happened in this? How can we take the events of this story and apply them to our own anxiety-producing situations?
Right.
And here we have Jesus in the midst of this anxiety. He's not taking the anxiety he's heightening the anxiety with the question.
Right. I mean, how many of us have had a boss turn to us and say, "Well, what do you think?" Or what about this situation?
Right.
And you're sitting there going, I was completely unprepared to be to formulate an answer to that question. And you start stumbling and bumbling, and it's a quick change. I hate to pick on you, but I'm going to change the question just before we start the podcast today, Keith.
It's an alteration. It was a minor alteration.
Because I've got, I'm on my way here. I'm like, I got 3 answers to that first question. I'm so excited about this.
Ruined your day.
And it's just like poof, off it goes. But anyway, but there's those moments, or do they cause us anxiety, or do we pray, or how do we face the moment when the boss turns to us and says, "Well, what do you think?"
Mm-hmm. And Jesus does this. He does not sit there and say, "I know this," to Philip and to the other 11 disciples. Don't worry about this. Before it even becomes a situation, I've got this. This is what I'm going to do. Here's my plan. Don't worry about this.
Right.
I've got it.
We got it.
He actually goes the opposite direction and confronts them with a question that they don't have the capability of answering. Please take note that this is how Jesus deals with you. Yep. Jesus is a great guy. Jesus loves you. There's no doubt about that. Be of good heart. Does he make you uncomfortable? Does he make you squirm a little bit? You bet, and he does, and we know that because he does that here. Yep. And the question is whether or not you're going to trust him while you squirm a little bit. You know,
right? I mean, I think about it. When I think about it, it's just like, he tests us. And it doesn't seem fair to us that Jesus would test these guys. Mm-hmm. He would test us, but. Sometimes we need the test just to remind us, are we studying? Are we doing? Are we, being good disciples? Because disciple means student.
Right. Constant student.
Constant learner.
Learning,
yeah.
An active word.
Guess what? They're going to be pop quizzes, gang.
Right, exactly.
We're not out of school ever.
Exactly.
Sorry, Alice Cooper. School is not out for summer.
And the other thing that occurs to me is that when the disciples woke up that morning, it was not on their phone that said, today, feeding of the 5,000. This is going to be the situation, and then walking on water. Now, so Andrew naively comes forward and says, "There's a boy here with 5 loaves and 2 fish." And then he stops himself and he says, "But what is that with so many people?" Here's
I don't know why I said that.
Why did I? Why? What am I doing? What am I saying? Everybody's. I mean, that's a comical situation because imagine
it's the guy that wants to say something.
Right, exactly. And the other 11 disciples are like, "Oh man, what are you doing? You're
Andrew."
And so this is us, and it's been documented. This is no profound thought. This is us offering our most pathetic, only what we have.
Right.
It's not enough. It's impossible. And yet we still offer it.
Right. But how great is it that God will accept that offering and say, "Okay, good job, Andrew. Thanks for bringing this up."
Right. We don't allow the inability, the inadequacy of our gift, the obvious inadequacy to keep us from making that offer.
And I want to go back to, it's the way you prayed to God when you were 21. If you want me, because you and I, and most probably all of our listeners and watchers, don't think that highly of ourselves when it comes to that. It's like, I can't do anything for you, God, but to be able to pray and say, "If you want me, I am yours."
Yeah.
What a great thing.
No, it was a memorable day. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
Jesus obviously successfully takes the meager offering of Andrew and feeds the 5,000 with more than enough left over. They want to make him king.
Right.
And he resists this.
Right.
And because he has no interest. It's very interesting today that the one that we're supposed to follow doesn't want to be president.
Right.
He doesn't want to be king.
But boy, the temptation, the very real temptation of just taking matters into his own hands.
Yes.
Just saying, "You know what?
Yeah.
I'm doing this.
I'm going to take a shortcut."
And he pushes through and doesn't take that shortcut. I think that's, again, a great life lesson for us.
Right. And to keep it, we have to have politics, we have to have leaders, we have to have government and all that kind of stuff, and we have to, thanks be to God, we at least have the right to vote, which has messed up as all of that can be sometimes. It's at least we participate in the choosing of but he resists. That is a lesser thing, than what he does and what he brings.
What a thought that's a lesser thing to rule.
Well, that's why I bring. That's why I bring it up. Is that this one Jesus who's going to die on the cross is of a higher nature for our lives and of a higher nature for us to follow. Yeah. When I see so much of us, myself included, putting faith and involvement and energy into who are our political leaders, and I'm by no means putting that down, but let's keep our eyes on the ball.
Right.
Then we move on to the walking on water.
So he's had enough of all these people. Yeah. They've tried to do something that he doesn't want to do. So he says, "You know what? I'm going to take off." Yeah. And the disciples climb in a boat, and then they sail off by themselves.
Right. And they go we figure about 3 miles rowing the boat across the Sea of Galilee. Yep. And Jesus is not with them. No. But then Jesus shows up, and it's the middle of the night, and it's stormy. It's probably raining. It's certainly very, very windy. They're straining to move the boat at all. Right. They're in the middle of the lake. They're as far from one as they are from the other. Yep. Of course, the analogies and the metaphors here for life are pretty easy. Yeah, they're pretty easy. So what was it like to be in the boat, do you think?
I mean, again, I think I go back to that story I tell, that during the time that I walked away from Christ, I knew who he was, right? At 14, I was sat down, we walked through the Romans road, and I understood I was a sinner, needed a Savior, and the Savior was Christ, Jesus.
So that's a pretty memorable day.
Right? That's a pretty big day, right?
You're going back to the first question, Keith.
Right?
You're not doing this in order.
And so here it is, the day that, but then I lost track, right? I used to say I didn't have any follow-up. I didn't have people. But I honestly, I've changed my answer. With age comes wisdom, so they say. I don't think that I was looking that hard for it. I didn't seek out that follow-up. People weren't just, coming to me with the answers that Christ would have. But I wasn't looking for people to tell me the answers either. So anyway, so here we are. I'm alone. They're in the boat. They know Christ is their Savior. They know that He is the Messiah, and yet they're still under their own power, struggling against the nature of the storm.
Yeah.
And that can be in any, that's that metaphor you were talking about. It can be in anything. If we're pushing ourselves saying, no, we've got to get this rowing down, we've got to do this, keep your eye out for rocks, whatever. It's like they just kind of were trying to do it by themselves.
And of course, Jesus knew what He was doing, putting them in that boat. He knew that the storm was no accident.
Right.
It's not like Jesus put him in there and say, this is going to be great because the forecast is for storms tonight. He is the storm. He brought the storm.
Right.
He authors the storm.
Exactly right.
And from that, to be in the boat is to feel hopeless.
Yes.
There
you go.
Is to be exhausted of your own effort,
right.
The point you're making. Yep. And because I'm exhausted of my own effort, my own ability, my own wiles, I am feeling hopeless. I'm feeling helpless. I'm feeling powerless. And Jesus has authored that moment. He's authored you to that place, and He does. Just like He did in the feeding of the 5,000. Testing them in the midst of their anxiety. Yep. Now He is pushing them to face their hopelessness and helplessness, and now they are ready to recognize His greatness. And He walks to them on the water, and He's not afraid to take us to that place.
Nope.
Please, in other words, if you're feeling that way, if you're feeling like the disciples in the boat, you're probably in exactly the right place. Right. Are you looking around for Jesus to show up? And it's a place where Jesus can't possibly show up. They're out in the middle of the lake. They're 3 miles out into the water on this huge Sea of Galilee. And it is a place where there's no possible way that Jesus can and Jesus shows up. Right. And when He does, it's terrifying. And they're terrified not anymore of their situation or the wind and the waves and their helplessness. They're terrified of God because God is far more frightening in His power and in His divinity than anything else you're going to experience.
Absolutely, because first you're afraid that the storm's going to swamp your boat and you're going to drown, forgetting whose you are, and then you see who it is that you belong to, Christ. You've given your heart to Him. And He's the one, like you said, that authors the storm. Then He does something that's completely impossible. He's walking along the water in the storm. But I want to point out that when He climbs in the boat, they're immediately taken to where they were going in the first place.
Right.
And I mean, what a great metaphor. Now, we don't always get that. I'm not going to say that God is going to deliver us instantaneously. But what a great way of looking at it. Is like, we are going, as soon as we let Jesus in the boat with us, terrified or not, we're going to get to where we're going, where He wanted us to go. He told them, go over to the other side. Yeah. And He takes them there. I just think that's just absolutely fabulous in that moment, a realization that when He steps in the boat, boom, they're on the shore.
Right. And they take Him into the boat in the midst of their helplessness, hopelessness, and terror.
Right.
Okay,
of Him.
That's where they are. Yeah. There isn't any sense of, hey, I'm ready to receive guests now. I've
got the house all cleaned up.
I've got myself together. No, they don't have themselves together at all.
No.
And in God's mind, that's the perfect time to arrive and to get into the boat.
Amen.
He has a completely different mentality about how prepared we are than we have of ourselves. Absolutely. And our perception of being prepared is completely wrong. Be helpless, be hopeless, be broken, be scared, and yet still welcome Christ. Yep. That's probably the best place for you to be, where you don't understand what's going to happen next.
And that goes for people that don't know Christ as well as those of us who do.
Absolutely. All right, well, this has been a fun podcast. We could probably go on for a while.
Oh, we sure could.
And so should you. There's so much to get from chapter 6, verses 1 through 21. And so check it out in your own time. We hope that this podcast has helped you.
Amen.
You suppose it has? Did we do any good today?
I think we did some real good.
All right, good. I'll take your word for it. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.